Hi, Ranger Leo here to welcome you back to Blue Heron for the next story in this year's Ghost Train event. Tonight, I'm standing under the historic Tipple Bridge, surrounded by the train tracks and the train cars that would have once carried coal away from this place. Tonight's storyteller is Mr. Jim Buck, and he's going to be sharing with us a tale about Jerome Boyett. I will now trade places with Jim. Enjoy.
Unanswered Questions. This is the title of my trilogy. The trilogy is 3 parts. It's story, it's history, and it's a tale. You take stories that's been handed down, tales that's been handed down. There's so many variations like ticks on a mangy dog. But the story, the trilogy, is Unanswered Questions. Let's take you back to the Depression years. United States in 1933. Times were rough, but the rural communities, especially the one in the Cumberland area, didn't realize there was a depression. They were living day to day anyway. They had no idea about Black Friday or the stock market. However, in one particular area, life was beginning to be real good. There had been a new railroad built, and the Stearns Coal and Lumber Company had job openings. The work was hard. The days were very long. But if you could do that, you could make a good living by working for this. April 1933. This is the setting of the story. Bardstown, Tennessee, the capital of Pickett County, Tennessee, the smallest county in the state of Tennessee. This is where the setting is of the sheriff. If you've ever saw Mayberry or Andy Griffith, the sheriff's department was very much like that. The sheriff was named George Winningham. He was very much like Andy. He was easygoing, he was calm, he didn't jump to conclusions, but he wouldn't back down either. His son, Floyd Winningham, was a deputy. They were much like any other rural sheriff, not much going on. Maybe the occasional bar fight at a nearby Static, Tennessee. Now, go back to Stearns Coal and Lumber Company, Virgin Timber. There was a big mining camp, camp number 14. Mr. Tillishaw, he was the superintendent of this camp. And he made a call to the sheriff's office on a Friday afternoon about 4 o'clock. Bardstown, Tennessee. The phone rang. George answered it, and Mr. Tillishaw said, "Sheriff, you got to come quick. Camp number 14 said this Boyett guy, this Jerome Boyett, he's killed some guy. He's still got a knife. He's going to kill more people." And hung up. It was a long way from Bardstown, Tennessee to camp number 14. Even though it was in Pickett County, you had to go through Pickett County to get there because of such a remote location. So George Winningham, Floyd Winningham, and Bam Garrett, a deputy, jumped in the patrol car and headed off to camp number 14, unaware what was in front of them. After a long, winding, dusty road trip, they finally got to camp number 14. They were met by Superintendent Tillishaw. And he informed them there hadn't been a killing. There hasn't been a killing. Unanswered question. Why did he tell them there had been a killing when there hadn't been a killing? The answer to this question and a lot of the other unanswered questions is going to be, we don't know. But he did say this Jerome Boyett's been causing trouble. And he's holed up down there in a train car. And there's going to be trouble. You got to go get him. This Jerome Boyett. Okay, who was this Jerome Boyett? In Scott County, Tennessee, there's a well-to-do farmer, Ransom Boyett. His Ransom Boyett, his wife Poppy Boyett, there was 4 daughters and 2 sons. Jerome was one of the sons, and his deaf-mute brother Eugene was another one. And Jerome, or Rome as they called him, was very, very protective over Eugene. He wouldn't let anybody bother Eugene. Jerome was about 21, 22 years old, but he had already developed a reputation, quite a reputation. He was excellent with a .44 automatic. He was excellent. Legend has it that he could be riding bareback on a horse, sideways, and shoot the buttons off of clothes on a clothesline. So he was developing a legend now. Also, Jerome's uncle, Albert Boyd. Albert Boyd had his own business going at the camp. On the evenings, Albert Boyd would bring in liquid refreshment for all the workers. Moonshine. And Albert, question, did Albert and Mr. Tillshaw have a business together? Were they in cahoots together? Unanswered question, we don't know. But anyway, Jerome had started selling moonshine too. Reports have it that Jerome had considered and was planning on taking over Albert's business at camp number 14. Is this true? We don't know. We do know that Jerome and Albert got into it, had kind of a scuffle, and Albert went home to get his long gun and come back and take care of Jerome. Is this why Tillshaw called the sheriff? We don't know. So the setting was there. Sheriff George, Deputy Floyd, and Bam Garrett went down the hill to approach the train. Question. Friday afternoon, the train should have been gone. Why was the train still there? We don't know. The boxcar, the doors were closed. Why was the boxcar? Why were the doors closed? We don't know. There was commotion in the boxcar, and had been told that Jerome and some of his buddies was in the boxcar. Who was in the boxcar? We don't know. All we know that the sheriff and 2 deputies were heading down to the boxcar. We'll have to piece together things from there, because all of a sudden the doors opened. Who opened the doors? We don't know. Did the sheriff announce that this is the sheriff's coming? We don't know. All we know, the shots rang out. And shots were fired. We do know that Jerome was hit in the ear and his face glazed. Eugene was shot in the arm. A cousin, Ted Boyd, was shot pretty serious. And we do know that Floyd Winningham, the deputy, the son of George Winningham, the sheriff, was shot right between the eyes, and he died immediately. Shortly later, Sheriff Winningham was shot in the stomach and fell over in severe pain. And all those in the boxcar took off to the woods. Tillshaw came down and they contacted the hospital. They sent an ambulance. They sent patrol cars from Livingston, Tennessee, which was a long way. It took a long time to get there. And reports got back to Byrdstown that Sheriff George Winningham was killed and his son Floyd was wounded, which was reversed, because Floyd was the one killed and George was the one that was wounded. They finally got there, took George and Floyd back. A day later, George Winningham, the sheriff of Pickett County, Tennessee, died. So we have Floyd Winningham that's dead. We have Sheriff George Winningham that is dead. After the funerals, they had to go find Jerome. They had meetings held in the Pickett County Courthouse. Willie Winningham, that's George's son, who was sheriff of Albany, Kentucky, and Herbert Martin, who was deputy, came over and organized this. Question, what authority did people, our sheriff from Kentucky, have in Tennessee? None, but they did it anyway. They held meetings. They organized posses. Were these posses deputies? We don't know. Anyway, they would take out. And Willie Winningham was in charge of sending all this. They kept records in the courthouse. They raised money in case some of the deputies, some of these people that were working for them, the posses, the vigilantes, got in trouble, to help pay them. Or also for a reward for whoever could capture Jerome Boyd. Now remember, this Ransom Boyd family was very well respected in the community. And most of the community people felt that Jerome Boyd had been framed. That is actually Albert that was involved. But these, late at night, all through Scott County, these groups of people would go and raid the homes. They'd hold the homeowners captive. And they'd search the home, they'd search the barns, night after night after night. They terrorized all the people in Scott County. This was not good for the Scott County people. They were very, very upset with it. Okay, they were looking for Jerome, and they had no search warrants, but they did it anyway. A little later on, the new sheriff at Pickett County, Mr. Bilbrey, he had an idea. Some say the idea was given to him by Willie Winningham. Was it? We don't know. But anyway, Sheriff Bilbrey went to the Ransom Boyd house and arrested everybody there. He said, I need to take you to the Pickett County Sheriff's Department. We'll keep you one day. So they took Ransom Boyd, Poppy Boyd, and all 5 children to the Sheriff's Department at Pickett County for one day. One day turned into a week. Sheriff Bilbrey treated them good. They were not really put in a cell, but it was kind of under house arrest. The assumption by Willie was that Jerome would turn himself in to take care of his parents. This didn't happen. So a scheme by a group of people, what group of people, we don't know. But a group of people had a scheme that we will let Ransom go back and tend his crops on Monday morning, and Friday he would bring Jerome back in. So Ransom left. The whole family was still there in Pickett County. Ransom went back to his farm. And sure, reports are that he did talk to Jerome, but Friday he came back to Pickett County with no Jerome Boyd. The whole community of Pickett County was very, very upset. Scott County was very upset too, so you had community because Scott County was still being terrorized. Every home, late at night, they'd come in and just go through and raid and look under every table, chair, and hold the homeowners ransom. So, they had another thing. They told Ransom. It's reportedly they told Ransom on a Monday morning, you go back and you come back Friday and you bring Jerome with you. It's reportedly they said it's your life or his life. So Ransom left. Friday afternoon came. No Ransom Boyd. Saturday came. No Ransom Boyd. Sunday came. No Ransom Boyd. Monday, some of the community went over to check the Boyd house. When they got there, they looked in the barn. They saw a rope hanging in the barn hallway. They got to the house. All the doors were locked. There was one back window that looked like had been opened, but it had shut. They looked through the window and they saw on the cupboard, they saw a key, they saw a cup, and they looked on the bed and they saw Ransom Boyd, motionless. They opened the front door and the smell would knock you down. Ransom Boyd had been dead for some time. He had red marks all around his neck. Question: did somebody hang him? We don't know. Was he poisoned? We don't know. It was reported he had a bad heart. Did he have a heart attack? We don't know. But within hours, there were 500 people around the Boyd home, and something had to be done. Sheriff Bilbrey got the report, and he took the Boyd family back to their house. Within a mile of the Boyd home, there was 2 rows of individuals, kind of 2 or 3 deep, and all of them had long guns. But Poppy Boyd said, people, Sheriff Bilbrey has treated us good. He's a good man. And they went into the cabin. They could barely stay in there because they had to stay on the front porch because his body was still there and the smell would just knock you down. Another lawman, kind of a young lawman and kind of a lanky lawman and a feisty lawman by the name of Maynard King came. He was a Scott County deputy. And he came and he held an inquisition. And he asked questions and he picked a jury. And they had a trial. A lot of people refused to be on the jury, but he finally got a jury picked. And they came to the conclusion that Ransom Boyd was killed by vicious hands, by untold people. Scott County was up in arms because one of their own had gotten killed. Pickett County was up in arms because their deputy and their sheriff had been killed. And now Ransom Boyd was added to the list. Maynard King, he's a key to this. He was a friend of Jerome Boyd. Reportedly that he had been meeting Jerome secretly and taking him food. Is this true or not? We don't know. We do know that Maynard King convinced Jerome Boyd to surrender. It was first said you need to go to Putnam County, to Cookeville, or to Crossville, or even to Nashville to surrender. But Jerome wanted to come home, and he's come to Scott County so he'd be close to his mama. So they came and brought him in. When they brought him in, there was a huge crowd on each side as they was bringing Jerome into the courthouse. And they brought him and locked him up in the courthouse. That would be a good part of the story, but the story takes another turn because the same night that he got there was a confusion and there was a problem up north of Oneida in Winfield community. This guy by the name of Harvey Winchester had the road blocked. So John Thompson, Naaman Terry, and his son Esker Thompson took off and went up to keep this Harvey Winchester to open up and let people go through the road. We don't know what happened. All we do know is that Esker Thompson was killed. Naaman Terry was killed by gunfire. And they arrested Harry Winchester and brought him into jail, the same jail where Jerome Boyd was. One of them was on the first floor, one of them was on the third floor. Problem. Winchesters, they could find no gun. Could this happen to be friendly fire and one of these two got hit by friendly fire? We don't know. All we do know is that the two bad guys that were accused of murders were in jail at Scott County. This could be a good end of the story, but it's not. They were going to have a trial Monday morning. Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, Scott County, Tennessee. Jerome Boyd and Harvey Winchester were on the first floor in the same cell. They'd never met each other, didn't know each other. Why were they in the same cell? We don't know. What we do know is that when darkness fell, a group of people with hoods on. How many is a group? Is it 3? Is it 10? Is it 20? We don't know. But a group of people with hoods on came in and took out Harvey Winchester and Jerome Boyd without no signs of forcible entry. The sheriff was gone. The jailer, we don't know where he was, but he was gone. And so they were removed and taken to a remote location. We don't know exactly what happened. However, Sunday morning, the bodies of Harvey Winchester and Jerome Boyd were found. They had been stripped naked, rope tied around them, run around in circles through briars. They had been whipped with switches. They had been shot. They had been stabbed. They had been hung. And finally, their bodies were burned. My goodness. That was the end of the story, right? No. Next Sunday morning, remember the deputy, Herbert Markham, that was a deputy for Willie Winningham in Albany, Kentucky? He was found he had been shot. Reports say that Sheriff at Willie had sent him down to a tourist camp because there had been some confusion and a fight down there. Well, reports from the camp says that he never came. But he had been shot and by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Herbert Markham shot himself while trying to get his gun out. Small problem, and Herbert Markham died. Small problem. Markham carried a .44. He was shot with a .38. Explain that self-inflicted gunshot wound. Could he have been one of those in this group the night and got hit by friendly fire? We don't know. But we do know that Herbert Markham was dead. A little later on, less than a month, Willie Winningham, the sheriff of Albany, Kentucky, was called to a remote location in Clinton County, Kentucky. They told him, now you don't need to go up there. He went anyway. Willie Winningham was killed. Willie Winningham was killed. Short time after that, Maynard King, the little hothead deputy from Scott County, got into it with his law enforcement officers, and Maynard King was killed. This group, however big the size was, had they met before and organized a plot to take these two prisoners? We don't know, but apparently they did. Who were they? We don't know. One thing we do know, did they meet? Did they say, nobody says anything about this? Because they knew if one person said one thing, well, it's going to be a whole bunch of people in trouble. These people did not tell their spouses, their brothers, nobody. They took it to the grave with them. Because they knew if one person ever talked, a lot of people would have major, major problems. Ten vicious deaths. The state shortly thereafter came to investigate. They were going to pull all the records in the Pickett County Courthouse to go over who all was in the groups and all this. Guess what happened to the Pickett County Courthouse? It burned. Many more people came to investigate. Nobody knew anything. They had no evidence on anybody. There was never any trials. Floyd, George, Ransom, Esker, Naaman, Harry, Jerome, Herbert, Willie, Maynard King. 10 vicious deaths, no trials, and nobody really knows what happened. Now, remember I said I need a lawyer because I have the perfect case, and I do. I have the perfect case. You can win $1 gazillion. It's a guaranteed. It's a slam dunk. I had a good friend, Barry Williams, call it a lay down because it was so easy. Las Vegas. Las Vegas has a saying that everybody knows. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. They stole it. In my opinion, they stole that because Las Vegas didn't get famous until 1950. This was in 1933. Las Vegas stole what happens, stays there, because what happens in this community, what happens in the town of No Business, at camp number 14 in 1933, what happened there stayed there. Nobody knows. So I've got a perfect case. 10 vicious deaths, and to this day, so many unanswered questions. This has been 80 years ago. These questions will never be answered because they told no one. Unanswered questions. Thank you.